Looking at this photo, one might assume that 8-year-old Gabriel is just an ordinary, cheerful boy grown up in a loving and supportive family. His smile seems genuine and his eyes are filled with trust for a world he had only begun to discover. But the truth is, this image is a cruel illusion.
This case is going to be very emotional, so at any point you find yourself getting a little overwhelmed, please step out of the courtroom, compose yourself, and then come back inside.
This was the case that just has followed me from that night.
It's still hard to believe two people did all those horrible things to him.
That was my friend, and it really caught me because it was his parent who took his life.
2013 Los Angeles, Palmdale area. In the shadow of neglected streets that for decades had absorbed crime, drug trafficking, and hopelessness, stood house number 203. A family lived here. 30-year-old Gabriel Fernandez, a partner Isauro Aguirre, and 4 children. The eldest Esquil, Virginia, and Arnold, and the youngest 8-year-old Gabriel. Palmdale was never a paradise. In the early 2000s, the law of the streets ruled here. And although the neighborhood's facade had been slightly updated over 13 years, the core remained the same, cruel and indifferent to the fates of the poor. Gabriel's family was part of this environment. The children's biological father, Arnold Contreras, spent almost their entire lives behind bars, leaving them abandoned to the whims of fate. But to understand how true evil was born in this house, we need to wind back time to August 29, 1983, the day Pearl Cynthia Fernandez herself was born. As it would later turn out, Pearl was not a gift or a long-awaited joy for her mother. She was a burden. The girl grew up in a vacuum of lovelessness and aggression. Her father did not leave prison cells for years, and her mother, instead of giving warmth, took out all her anger on her daughter, regularly raising a hand against her. Pearl grew up in a world where violence was the only understandable language, and years later, this language would become a death sentence for her own son. By the age of 9, young Pearl's life already resembled a swift fall to the very bottom. At the age when children play with toys, she began using methamphetamine and alcohol. At 11, she made her first escape from home, and in the 8th grade, she finally dropped out of school entirely. But behind this behavior hid an even more awful underside. According to Pearl herself, in her childhood, she was repeatedly subjected to sexual abuse by her biological uncle. Moreover, she claimed that her uncle's friend held her hostage for several days, where they took turns raping her. We cannot know for sure if this was true. According to her claims, it was those early rapes and cruelty that broke her psyche forever. At 17, Arnold Contreras appeared in Pearl's life. After only a few months of their relationship, she became pregnant with their firstborn, Esquil. By the age of 23, the couple already had 3 children, and when Pearl learned of her 4th pregnancy, she didn't want this child. She considered having an abortion. However, the time frame no longer allowed for the termination of the pregnancy. In 2005, a boy was born, whose arrival in this world was met not with joy, but with anger. Gabriel Fernandez was born to a woman who herself knew no love and didn't want him. His father, Arnold, loved his son but was rarely present in his life, spending much of his time in prison. And this was only the beginning of his tragedy. Neither during pregnancy nor after birth did maternal instinct ever wake up in Pearl. After only 3 days, she simply left her newborn son at the hospital, forcing him out of her life. The boy was handed over to the care of his great-uncle Michael and his partner David. And as time would show, those were the only 4 years in Gabriel's life when he was truly happy, loved, and safe. In 2009, everything collapsed. Gabriel's grandparents, led by prejudice, took the child away, believing that in Michael's family, he would grow up defective. They didn't know that while trying to save him from an imaginary threat, they were pushing him into the paths of a true beast. 2012 became the final boundary. This was the last time Gabriel slept in a soft bed and ate normal food. Pearl and her boyfriend Isauro Aguirre restored custody. From that day on, the 8-year-old boy's life turned into an endless nightmare. On May 24, 2013, a call rang out at the police station. 30-year-old Gabriel Fernandez reported, "Her son is not breathing." But when the doctors and officers entered the room, they were seized by horror. Gabriel indeed was not breathing. Doctors would later confirm brain death. But what they saw on his body defied any explanation. The boy had been turned into one continuous wound. Bruises, abrasions, hematomas, marks from airgun pellets. There were bald patches on his head. Hair had been torn out by the root. This was not the result of childish play. The autopsy added the final and most terrifying touch into this picture. In the child's stomach, they found nothing but cat feces. His ribs had been broken for a quite long period of time. Every breath, every movement brought this tiny person unbearable agony. But the most terrifying thing was revealed later. This hell was not a secret. During the year that Gabriel was slowly dying in their house, at least 5 complaints were filed with the police and social services. Complaints to social services came regularly from family members, from a random security guard, and most often from his school teacher, Jennifer Garcia. But the system designed to protect remained deaf. When Pearl and Isaura were arrested on May 23, 2013, they continued to lie. Pearl cold-bloodedly claimed that Gabriel simply liked to lie and make up stories, and that everything was fine at their home. She didn't know that this time, Gabriel's quiet voice, documented in teachers' reports and witnesses' testimony, would become her sentence. One day, Gabriel approached his teacher Jennifer with a question that no children in the world should ever have to ask. He quietly asked if it was normal for him to bleed after his mother hit him with a metal seatbelt. Jennifer, seized with horror, immediately called social services. A social worker named Stephanie Rodriguez was assigned to the case, but instead of a rescue, a countdown began. The next day, Gabriel came to class with a bloodied lip and strands of hair torn out. To the teacher's question, he answered directly. His mother punched him in the face and dragged him by his hair. Another call to social services. A day later, a new confession. His mother shot him in the face with an air gun. And another call. The worst happened. Every time Jennifer tried to reach out to the system, Gabriel paid for it with his body. The torture became more sophisticated and help never came. The child who initially trusted the teacher, at some point, simply fell silent. He realized that complaints only brought new pain, and he began to fear sharing the truth. Perhaps the most heartbreaking detail in this entire story is Gabriel's last school assignment. For Mother's Day, he made a card with his own hands. In it, he wrote how much he loved his mom and how beautiful she was. That card was still lying on his desk when Jennifer Garcia learned that Gabriel was gone. Now, looking at that very photo where the boy is smiling and holding letters in his hands, we know the truth. He wasn't happy. His front teeth were missing because they had been knocked out with a bat by his own mother and her partner. But he still continued to smile, continued to make cards, write about how beautiful she was, and say how much he loved her. After Gabriel missed school for a full 14 days, Jennifer noticed he had become like a shadow and raised the alarm again. His great-aunt Elizabeth also did not remain silent. She repeatedly contacted social services and called the sheriffs twice. Just 29 days before the tragedy, Arturo Martinez, a security guard at a social welfare office, noticed horrific abrasions on the boy's body. He couldn't just walk by and, risking his own job, violated confidentiality rules by calling 911. To help understand the scale of this systemic hell, from 2005 to 2012, more than 60 complaints were filed against Gabriel Fernandez and Isaura Aguirre. 60 signals that something was wrong in this family, but social services did not file a single official report. When that same brave security guard Arturo Martinez called 911, the case fell to domestic violence specialist Marciela Corona. She saw Gabriel, she saw his mother, but instead of helping, she began mocking the child's hairstyle. She thought it was funny that clumps of hair were missing from the head of an 8-year-old boy. Her superiors simply ordered her to close the case. There were 15 minutes left until the end of the workday. It was a Friday, and no one was going to pay extra for saving the life of some boy. This indifference cost Gabriel his life. Later, Pearl's older children would tell investigators details that would be forever etched in their memories. For 8 months, Gabriel lived not in a home, but in a concentration camp. He was not fat. He slept in a tiny cabinet with a gag in his mouth so his screams wouldn't disturb his tormentors' rest. He was forbidden from washing or using the bathroom. Instead of food, he was forced to eat cat feces and rotten scraps. If he vomited, he was forced to eat it. When he was released from the cabinet, he had to wash away the traces of his existence himself. Torture became daily entertainment for Pearl and Isauro. They shot the child with air guns, sprayed pepper spray in his face, and knocked out his teeth with a bat, and all this was accompanied by their loud laugh. Gabriel was the only target. Aguirre hated him because for the first 4 years, the boy grew up in the home of a gay great-uncle. Isauro was certain that Gabriel was also gay, and in this monstrous way, he tried to instill masculinity in him. On the fateful night of May 24, Gabriel made one last attempt to save himself. He approached his mother and whispered, "Mom, why don't you leave him? He hurts me too much." Aguirre heard this from the next room. He burst in a rage, pinned the child to the wall, and began delivering crushing blows. Pearl didn't flinch. She only snapped, "You think I would leave him because of you?" And began systematically finishing off her own son with her feet. When they were finished, Gabriel stopped breathing. The trial of this couple became one of the most high-profile in history. Prosecutor John Hatami called Aguirre pure evil. Isauro's lawyers tried to play on contrast. They brought witnesses from the nursing home where he worked before. There, he was known as Gentle Shaggy, a quiet and caring assistant who patiently changed the diapers of the elderly. No one could believe that this gentle giant was capable of such a thing. But the mask was ripped away. On November 14, 2017, Isauro Aguirre was sentenced to death. He didn't admit guilt and to this day awaits the execution of the sentence in a San Diego prison. Gabriel Fernandez, trying to avoid death, took a plea deal and received a life sentence. She cried in court, blaming her difficult childhood and her mother. An evaluation showed that her intelligence was at the level of a second grader, but that did not change the fact that she destroyed her child. In her final statement in court, she declared,
Every day I was trying to be better something. I'm sorry to my family, and I want you to know that I love you. And I hope one day you will forgive me. And I hope one day you will come to the sense of confidence. I wish I could say to you. And to the Rawson family, they've never known my son. And they just want to say, elements because they only work with only hit a certain parties only. So when they talk about Mado, it hurts me more because they do not know him. And I still have to take you my God effort.
4 social workers who for a month cold-bloodedly ignored the cries for help were charged with child abuse and falsification of public records. It seemed justice would win here as well. However, in 2020, all charges were dropped. An appeals court judge ruled that their criminal negligence and inability to protect Gabriel from his executioners was not a criminal offense. According to the court, it was not child abuse. The only punishment for those who effectively handed Gabriel into the hands of killers was termination. They simply lost their jobs, while Gabriel lost his life. But there was hardly any remorse in these words, rather just an attempt to save herself from an ultimate punishment. Regarding Isauro Aguirre, despite the harsh sentence, he is unlikely to ever wait for the execution of the death penalty. In the state of California, a moratorium is effectively in effect, and the ultimate measure of punishment remains just words on paper for years. But perhaps the peak of cynicism was Gabriel Fernandez's attempt to go free. In 2021, She filed an appeal demanding a case review. Just think about it, a woman who for a month watched the torments of her son, who herself finished him off with her feet while he prayed for help. This woman found the audacity to state that she deserves a second chance. She never realized her guilt. In her world, there is no repentance, only pity for herself. Fortunately, the court remained steadfast and refused her a review. Gabriel Fernandez will spend the rest of her days behind bars, where she will have plenty of time to look at the walls of the cell, just as Gabriel once looked at the walls of his cabinet. Many hoped that the death of Gabriel Fernandez would be that very turning point that would once and for all destroy the old system and build a new one. But the reality turned out to be much more complicated. This case did not change the system radically. It only made its invisible flaws visible to everyone. Gabriel's tragedy proved the problem was not that social services lacked information. The problem lay in the formal approach, in the paperwork, and in the criminal dilution of responsibility, when no one specifically was responsible for the child's life. After the sentence, court and social services began to act more cautiously. Internal control and the number of checks were strengthened, but the mechanism, those very gears of the huge bureaucratic machine, remained almost the same. The strongest effect of this story turned out to be not legal, but social. Gabriel Fernandez became a symbol of how easily and openly extreme cruelty can exist if every witness believes that this is not their business or that the responsibility lies with someone else. This story teaches us the main thing: hell can happen behind closed doors. And sometimes the only chance for salvation for such a child is you and me, those who'd not pass by. Gabriel's voice went silent in 2013, but the memory of him must live on, so that no other child ever feels so alone in their pain.